It is generally agreed that gender equity is instrumental for environmental conservation and sustainable development. But what does this mean? How can changes in the environment, like deforestation, impact men and women differently? How might these changes impact culture and gender roles? And why does this matter? Indonesia is an interesting place to study the intersection between gender and environment. It is a place of incredible cultural diversity. Indonesia is home to over 255 million people and hundreds of ethnic and linguistic groups on over 17,000 islands. It is also home to some of the largest, densest, and most biodiverse tropical forests in the world. These forests are being lost at an alarming rate. This is a glimpse into one community in Indonesia, in the province of East Kalimantan, in the Regency of Berau, in the village of Duhung. The people of Duhung provided insights into the changes taking place in the surrounding forests and in the local economy. These insights illuminate how deforestation impacts the lives and livelihoods of men and women differently.
Untuk masyarakat, kita bicara masalah hutan itu, maka ada istilah yang hutan adalah air susu ibu gitu. Jadi hutan itu segalanya untuk pemenuhan kebutuhan pangan, papan, sandang, semua dari hutan. Karena itu namanya kerja gotong royong, Bu. Saya tidak mau itu ditinggalkan. Kalau dulu tidak ada perbedaan, tapi sekarang ini ada perbedaan. Sekarang sudah mulai berubah, ibu-ibu sudah tidak sanggup lagi berburu. Kalau berburu yang lebih dekat, lebih gampang itu ibu-ibu ikut. Tapi kalau sekarang ini sudah berhari-hari berburu di pagi.
In Duhung, for instance, there are Dayak Punan. Dayak Punan is known as a nomadic community. They live communal and then they move around based on their livelihood. So for example, for now it's the time to harvest paddy field. So they will stay in one area, clear the forest, and then they wait it until the first harvest, and when it's finished they will move to another place. They also hunter. They're their main source of livelihood, hunter for their own food, not for sale. So that's why they keep moving, and then they have strong dependency on forests.
The Dayak Punan are traditionally nomadic. In recent years, they decided to settle in one place for the first time. They moved to the village of Duhung in 2007. Now that they have settled, there have been a lot of changes. One major change is that children now attend school. They explain how the presence of logging companies near Duhung is affecting their livelihoods and way of life.
Sangat besar perubahan. Kalau dulu kan masih hutannya pokoknya belum diganggu sama sekali sama perusahaan. Tapi sekarang yang kita lihat kan memang di sekitar kampung ini kan memang masih utuh, tapi kalau kita ke dalam sana sudah ganggu perusahaan.
The impacts of of first the timber companies in the 70s and 80s, and then the timber plantations then came in after the logging companies, and then now the oil palm companies. They're radically changing the way the local economic system has functioned.
Indonesia has 131 million hectares of forest. In 2012 alone, Indonesia lost 840,000 hectares, overtaking Brazil as the country with the fastest rate of deforestation. In 2015, there were around 100,000 active forest fires in Kalimantan and Sumatra. Many were the results of clearing forested peatlands to make way for plantations of commodities like palm oil. When peat burns, it releases large quantities of carbon dioxide and methane and contributes to climate change.
Forest land takes about more than 60% of Indonesia's land area. We have the third largest tropical forest after Brazil and DRC. And forests have been declining, so both the quality and the quantity of forests have been declining, which is an issue.
In Indonesia, there's this growing concern that Indonesia harbors some of the most precious and some of the most dense forests in the world. And that forest is being lost at an alarming rate. You know, there are a wide range of factors, but a lot of it is due to agribusiness expansion.
About 30 million people are depending directly on forest. So livelihood of 30 million people are depending directly on forest. If you count the workers and then the multipliers, then you will end up it's about 70 million. That's how many people's life is depending on the health of the forest.
Deforestation and climate change threaten wildlife habitat and biodiversity. This in turn impacts food security.
Ya, seperti tadi contohnya binatang sudah agak liar, kemudian seperti cuaca yang sekarang yang kita rasakan kan itu juga salah satu dampaknya. Ya, yang tidak menentu. Kalau dulu kan bisa kita prediksi bulan ini seperti ini, bulan ini seperti ini kan, tapi sekarang sudah tidak. Kemarau itu dari Agustus sampai September itu kemarau, tapi sekarang sudah tidak menentu.
Kalau jumlah hutan itu memang berkurang karena kegiatan hutan itu semakin berkurang, pohon kayunya berkurang, binatang juga berkurang karena binatang ini tergantung dengan pohon kayu karena buah kayu itu jadi pakan binatang.
Nah, kalau dulu kan sebentar aja kita cari ada. Kalau sekarang kan susah, apalagi banyak orang sudah sekarang ini. Bukan kita aja yang di kampung ini yang cari di sini kan, banyak orang dari jauh-jauh itu cari ke sini. Ya, apalagi babi itu, ikan juga begitu. Ikan tuh yang pertama-tama mereka itu usaha tempat kita. Makanya kita itu susah sudah sekarang.
Deforestation impacts men and women differently. According to the community members, the biggest impact is on time spent in the forest. Women are spending less time in the forest than they did in the past, and less time relative to men. They identified several reasons for this. First, because hunting now takes much longer, women and men can no longer afford to spend the time it would take to hunt together. Second, since children now go to school, women are often the ones who stay home to care for them.
Kalau perubahan sih banyak perubahannya tidak kayak dulu kan. Dulu kita cari saja makanan atau cari saja yang kita bikin uang itu ada, tapi sekarang jauh lebih tidak kayak dulu lagi.
Itu sekitar biasanya 3 atau 3 hari lah dalam seminggu, tidak terus setiap hari gitu. Kalau dulu memang ada sampai 4 hari atau ya pokoknya setiap hari lah kalau bapak pergi, tapi sekarang sudah agak kurang ya, karena mungkin juga karena anak kita sekolah kan, jadi kita enggak bisa juga tinggalkan setiap hari gitu.
Another reason that women are spending less time in the forest pertains to security. Because of the presence of outsiders in her community, like loggers and poachers, Ibu Flora no longer feels safe in the forest alone like she once did.
Karena kami tidak berani pergi sendiri kan, ikut dengan bapak sama anak juga. Apalagi sekarang kan banyak mereka bilang ada juga yang manusia yang suka kita di hutan tuh. Ya sekarang ini banyak bilang mereka yang seperti yang merampok orang itu kan, itu ya di hutan. Kalau sekarang tidak berani.
Kalau aktivitas ibu-ibu yang tinggal di rumah itu macam-macam. Ada yang bikin kerajinan tangan, ada juga yang tanam-tanam sayur sedikit, dan ada lagi kegiatan-kegiatan sosial yang lain.
Pribadi memang sangat itu terasa sekali, karena kan hutan itu kan merupakan satu hal yang sangat di mana kita bisa bersenang-senang di hutan itu kan. Dengan situasi yang ada ini kan sudah mulai gitulah, sudah mulai ada rasa kenapa hutanku sudah begini kan gitu. Ada rasa sedih lah tersendiri gitu karena hutan sudah.
Duhung provides a really interesting point to illuminate how gender shapes transitions. For good and for bad. But the way that the villagers talk about their lives before settling is that they were together all the time. That men, women, children moved together, they set up their temporary homes together, they hunted, they gathered food together, they prepared it together. There is a sense from everybody of this togetherness. And perhaps there was some sex disaggregation of who did what explicitly, but the general feeling is that it was equal.
Compared to most other cultures in the world, they have definitely one of the most egalitarian cultures there is. Although women they're not normally traditionally the head man. They are very involved in decision-making in communities, maybe not necessarily at a meeting, but much of the decision-making goes on before a meeting. They have strong voices in many, many contexts.
But what the villagers talk about now is the introduction of a sense of division in terms of labor, in terms of what people do, how they do it, where they do it, when they do it, with whom they do it.
The transformations that are going on in the environment and in particular in the forest are actually inducing a hardening of gender distinctions.
This hardening of gender distinction is being caused in part by longer hunting times and the increased need for care work, which is preventing women from spending as much time in the forest.
As the village is shifting and changing into this new space, women are really being left out. While she has opportunities to send her children to school, which is part of the Great Modernity Project of Indonesia, and one of the rights that all children have as citizens, the husbands are all leaving to go back into the forest where they have businesses, they're developing new entrepreneurial space, but this mandates that someone stay home and take care of the household, and that has become women's job. The children have new opportunities. The men have new opportunities, but women are really left holding it all together so that in this moment of transition, the community and family still stays grounded and together.
As Ivo Flora mentioned, women are also spending less time in the forest because they perceive it to be less safe than it once was.
It's not that they don't feel safe because they don't know the forest. They know the forest. This is where they have grown up and lived their lives. This to them is their home. It's where they're emotionally grounded and physically grounded. But there's something new going on in the forest. And they talk about the loggers, they talk about the foreigners that are coming in who have more rights to the land. And so they don't feel safe because they're no longer in charge. Societies discipline and control women and keep them at home and keep them grounded in communities by making them feel unsafe and by disciplining them into thinking that they can't be alone. And so they always have to be accompanied by somebody, or they need to be part of a project or part of a family movement, and they can't go out alone. So I wonder a little bit about how much of the safety and insecurity sense is really a myth.
Duhung provides a glimpse into the gender impacts of deforestation in one community, on one island, in one country. It takes a lot of time and effort to truly understand the complexities around gender and environment in a specific community, and it's even more challenging to understand global trends. The failure to analyze gender and capture the different experiences of men and women can perpetuate inequality, especially in the environmental sector. Improved access to sound data on gender and environment can help us to compare the experiences of different communities and identify global trends. So, how is the intersection of gender and the environment understood more broadly?
Well, we're talking about various things when we're talking about gender and environment. We need to understand, for example, the differentiated uses that women and men have of the ecosystems. We want to know the access and control that they have on different resources. We want to know their knowledge that is different. We want to know how they participate in decision making, in governance issues. So it is having the whole holistic understanding of people and environment and the way that they use, they control, they manage the resources.
Because the study of gender is so context specific, it's difficult to extrapolate from the wealth of existing case studies to produce standardized national level and global data sets.
For so many years I was telling, nice stories, Lorena. Another anecdote of a poor woman using this or that somewhere. Now I can come back and said, this is not a story. We're not telling stories. However, stories are important because they reflect somebody's lives. And who are we to not recognize the value of a story, of a life story? But definitely when you come up with more solid numbers, it does make a difference.
Trying to address the difficulties inherent in producing standardized data on gender and environment issues, Lorena Aguilar and her team created the Environment and Gender Index. The index ranks countries according to indicators such as number of women and the number of men in environmental policy-making positions.
We had all these lists and ideas of what we were going to collect. And then reality hit us. There were so little countries that were collecting disaggregated data. And our main challenge right now is not only building an index, but generating that knowledge and filling up that tremendous gap.
Aguilar found significant gaps in sex disaggregated data in several environmental sectors and little to no sex disaggregated data in the forestry sector.
We have nothing on fisheries. We have nothing on forestry. We don't know who is using the forest. Very few countries, not even in agriculture that we claim that we have it. We don't have the data even at the international level.
In order to fill these gaps, a first step is to collect standardized sex disaggregated data on a national level.
Sex disaggregated data is going to tell you how men or males and females stack up along particular indicators. So education, school achievement levels, for example, or employment data. I think that's really important to know. But the second thing that is really important to know is that you have to apply a gender lens to how you think about the indicators and the data. You might just be asking the wrong question.
In order to understand the difference between collecting sex disaggregated data and conducting analysis using a gender lens, it's important to understand the difference between the terms sex and gender.
Sex is the biological sex that you are born with or perceive yourself as or are perceived as having. Your gender is, in a sense, how the society that you live in and you yourself interpret what that means.
Sex disaggregated data involves the simple separation of data based on categories, men, women, or other. It's the methodology of data collection and data analysis that requires the more complex task of using a gender lens. One best practice when collecting data is to ensure that both men and women's voices are equally represented in surveys, in meetings, and in focus group discussions.
If you want to get answers from both men and women, you have to be sure that you're in a context in which they're comfortable providing you with those answers. You have to think about the language with which people understand what they're doing. So if you say, for example, to a woman, "Do you work?" she may understand that as, "Are you employed?" Or she might understand that as, "Who does the household work?" Right? you need to know what it is exactly that you have to try your hardest to understand how people are going to hear the question that you ask.
We've mostly not been listening to the voices of communities at all. And when we have occasionally listened to communities, we've listened to the men only. We talked to the head of household or something like that. And so all the ideas and beliefs and desires and benefits that women might have or want are not necessarily denied them, but ignored.
So my primary role is to help scientists at C4, scientists and researchers, to better integrate gender issues in their research. In many societies, it's usually men who are much better versed at speaking with outsiders. I'm making a gross generalization because, of course, that depends on many different contexts. But in rural areas, generally, you see that trend. And a lot of people would rather speak with somebody who can speak very quickly and they can fill their form very easily than to have this painstaking discussion with someone and be able to explain their ideas, their notions about what is important to collect, what that person is able to understand, and what that person thinks is important to be able to reflect too about their realities.
In most areas in Indonesia, usually women take a back seat. Once, like, we already had set up the time, okay? For instance, 10 o'clock here, okay? But then after 10 o'clock, only 2 women showed up, okay? So we needed to, like, knock on every door, right? Knock on every door, lure them, then, oh, don't worry, you just bring your kids. We have balloons, we have, you just bring your kids. And then we'll have food. We had to do that, right? So it's a little bit more of a challenge to gather women.
Without a mandate to collect sex disaggregated data and to conduct analysis using a gender lens, voices are lost. Ignoring the intersection between gender and environmental issues hides an important story.
But it's again a way to make invisible the reality. In some countries, it's just trying to hide the sun with your finger and not recognizing that women are there at the forefront using natural resources and therefore should benefit from it. So sometimes it's a way of discrimination, still making them invisible. We don't count, we're not there, we're not to be seen, therefore we should not be allowed to participate, we should not be allowed to engage, because women at the end are not involved. How can they say that if they have not produced the data?
Sex disaggregated data is probably it's a very fundamental part, or at least a first step in trying to use a gender lens when we're looking at what's happening in communities and globally as well. If we don't know what the men are doing and what the women are doing, then we have no way of addressing the inequities that we observe. And we have no way really of knowing how inequitable any given situation is. So having disaggregated data by sex is a very important element if we want to look at gender.
Even the best intentioned policies are very rarely gender neutral. And when you act in a context where gender actually is a factor of differentiation, which is in most contexts, both because it differentiates your policies, right? You're going to look for the head of the household. But you might be looking for the head of the household in a context where the head of the household doesn't have the functions that he does in the context that you come from, right? So because it permeates your policy framework, and because gender also permeates the social structure that you are relating to, unless you sort of think about that explicitly, there will be many unintended consequences in terms of gender relations.
Because it takes so much effort to truly understand the complexities around gender and environment in a specific community like Long Duhung, we need to continue to improve the tools and processes that will enable us to identify global trends. Organizations like the International Union for Conservation of Nature, the Center for International Forestry Research, UN Women, and others are leading the charge to improve access to sound data and data analysis related to gender and environment. It will take a broad and consistent effort to fill the gaps. The people of Long Duhung illustrate how changes in the environment are affecting the lives and livelihoods of men and women differently. Gender equity is instrumental for environmental conservation and sustainable development. The issues at the intersections of gender and the environment must be understood, measured, and mainstreamed to achieve sustainable and equitable outcomes.